Wait, was that good? Have a thumbs up. Thumbs up. All right, everyone. It's happening. It's happening. Everyone, it's time to get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome.
Yeah.
If you are here for the full board meeting, that's not this. This is the curriculum committee meeting. It's so nice to have you all here. I call this public meeting to order. Are there any public comments, Tricia?
No. Public comment.
We have yet to have a public comment. And I feel a certain way about it. Do we have any responses to the lack of public comment? Alright, at this point, we will approve the minutes from our work session. Thank you for sending them out, Tricia. Did you have a chance to review?
I did.
Alright, so.
We approve.
Yes.
Do we approve?
Let's
Yes,
vote.
we approve.
Yes, we approve. All not favor. Erin, I know is joining a little later, so we can mark it. Erin is not present for that. We have a nice, cool agenda tonight. We're gonna start off with Mary, our very own Mary Grover, right there. Got kicked out of her normal seat by these two interlopers.
No, we're all in a row. I'm tagging in greatness.
Yeah, there we go.
These two folks, Miss Charm, Dr. Jennifer Vischer are joining us this evening.
Yes, we were arguing about where they were sitting. I can get back to that. Let that be for the record sometime. But we'd love to start off with you talking to us about the follow-ups from the math presentation before we get into the literacy.
Fantastic. So I am going to invite Katie Hart up because I really want to make sure you don't have to move my so I just really want to thank Katie because she not only got to yes on this quickly, but followed all the accessibility guidelines that our website dictates for. So one thing that surfaced when we talked about math last time was just caregivers having access to the module handouts, the letters to home. Some teachers are sending them home. We can post them on the website. So Tricia, do you want to casting that for us? So you're going to see here, and I will say it publicly, the needle that I'm trying to thread is that we don't infringe on any copyright laws and we give access to the curriculum, because some curricular adoptions actually say you can't post that. You can't post the materials. So we feel like you've done a good job with that. Do you want to walk us through the site and your work on it?
Sure. So I met with Pat and Mary, and they provided all of the folders and materials and handouts that get sent home with families. And so just sort of an overview of Eureka Math Squared is at the top. And then if you scroll down, you have the grade level math resources. And these are all the math letters. So these are the pages that get ripped out from the booklets. And then, so they're separated by grade, and you open them, it'll take you to a Google folder, and it's all of them by module in the Google folder.
Tricia, do you mind clicking on kindergarten just so those people at home watching and all of us can get a feel for what it looks like?
Yeah, and then you open module 1. These will probably look familiar.
So there's multiple clicks, which because there are multiple resources for families. So that's why I wanted for us to walk through. If you have any questions, of course, you can ask your child's teacher. And I also want to thank Jenna Hallis, who put these all together in 2024. Oh, actually the date's up there. Yeah, 20, look at that. So Tricia, can I ask trouble you one more time? Yeah, just click on any one of them so people can see what these are. So it is a letter to the family. And it explains some of the activities, and then it gives these at-home suggestions. I think we're all really, it's within our culture to talk about reading to your child as soon as they're born. You leave the hospital with a book. And as far as math is equally important. So building a culture of what are some activities to do with your child. These letters capture this. These resources. Do you want to add about accessibility?
Yeah, so we are eventually moving away from PDFs, but Eureka Map has actually already tagged all of these PDFs, so they are accessible PDFs that are shared on our website right now, so. So perfect.
Thank you. Yeah, I spent some time looking through this also. I mean, Trish, if you want to go down to the original website, I also just think there's very helpful information and just like the supporting your child in math, understanding like there is a math curriculum and here's what it is. And like there's certain like things I should expect for my child to experience in math class. I thought this was really helpful. I was curious, like with Clever, what exactly are families' permissions within Clever?
I would have to research that. I don't know that offhand, what families see when they click on Clever.
Because it says like for full access to the curriculum, so I'd be curious to see more, or maybe it's using your child's account. So what are the children? I guess I'm just genuinely curious.
Let's put that on a follow-up for what it looks like.
Especially in the past years, we've had like a code that we can like scan and get on ourselves, but I can't remember exactly what it looked like, but there was someone to access it.
Yeah, and Trisha, I'm sorry, do you mind keeping that up for just one second? I really appreciate you. As you scan down that window, so there are the resources, and then here are the pacing guides by grade level. So as far as at the bottom of the slide, this shows you to the modules and the content. And then at the very bottom, supporting your child in math. The content from this is borrowed from the state's numeracy briefs, which were launched. Time moves so quickly, but I believe it was last spring. The numeracy briefs. We met as a region to review them, and so we're going to be talking about literacy later, but the state also published literacy briefs. So they are components of community engagement, instruction, and priorities that we have as a state around math instruction. So I think that if you're wondering where that content comes from, and you probably could even add the numeracy briefs on here. They have some nice graphics that are more, I think, infographics that condense the content in a digestible way. Because if you were to go on right now to ICSD and pull the numeracy briefs, each one is about 4 to 6 pages, and there's a lot of content. So the infographics, I would suggest we add that just as we're thinking out loud. It's so helpful to see this up.
I also appreciate like the dates for content. I know like we had raised questions about like what sort of pacing is expected from the district and what like should families expect in terms of what their kids are getting when. So it's nice to see that. I'm curious about. I know like there are questions that sort of raised in 2 categories, right? There was the categories of as families, how do families know? And as a district, how do we make sure it's happening? So I'm curious, like outside of this website, which I think is amazing, are there like, like what are some of the, I guess, next steps, actions, or things we should know about? Like some of the things we raised about like the pacing guide, for example, like maybe being like very far behind, right? Or not receiving this sort of information.
Yeah, so I think at another curriculum meeting, we may want to review the 5-year scope and sequence of adopting any curricular adoption. So the first year being one where we're actually asking teachers to give themselves a lot of grace to learn the curriculum, learn how to apply it in a classroom and the constraints of what the academic day looks like, for example, the schedule looks like. And then, and the pacing and pay attention, because that's a steep learning curve for the pacing. So that was actually something that surfaced around, we could see from textbook orders and from conversations with teachers, there's so much content in Eureka Math Squared. To get through all of it isn't always realistic. So where there's duplicity, where do we want to make sure, you know, we're prioritizing those low floor, high ceiling problems? And so that's the role of the math strategist. So how do we know? Convening all of the grade level teachers by middle school feeder schools to review what they've gone over, where they are in the curriculum and prep for the next module. And the local assessments is how we know children are getting access to this. And looking at those assessments to as a feedback loop for teaching.
Well, it's really great to see that. How is this being shared out with families? For the small percent of families who aren't watching this meeting.
We can share this page. I want to go over it one more time with Kat, but we'll share this page out with principals. So that they can include it in their weekly newsletters. And we can have it in the next insider as well. We have middle school math on here as well, and so we're working to eventually have all of it as well.
So this is not necessarily, it's starting as a math thing, but it's kind of progressing to something more comprehensive. That's really cool. I see a lot of great. I think it's really nice when there's just some like shared information about what should be the case, because it helps us all hold each other to it. So lovely. Thank you for your work on that. Well, at this point, sorry about the whole interloper comment. It's time to hear our middle school literacy presentation again for anyone who's watching, listening. We talked about elementary math, and we're sort of starting to just like, how as a board can we support the excellent work that is happening around trying to provide students with like a more shared experience across our states. I know when I was a student in the Ithaca City School District, that was just not the case. I think like we were getting really radically different experiences depending on the classes we were in, the teachers that we had, the school we were in. And it's nice to see, I think, a more equitable approach. And so take it away.
Can we present?
Actually, we saw, like, we've seen the presentation, but
Okay.
we got it emailed in advance.
Okay.
So don't feel like you need to like read verbatim to us, like we have a general sense. We might stop and ask questions throughout, and it's getting ahead. Please just say, shut up, like something.
And I do want to introduce both of you, if I may, because it's really a privilege and joy to work with both of you as department leaders. And Ms. Charm Varga, Dr. Jennifer Fisher have been very intentional in conversations this year on how to collaborate across both middle schools. And so thank you for coming this evening. Appreciate it. And we will get you out of here in time to get ready to teach again tomorrow. Too late. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'll start. If you wouldn't mind that one. So, this is coming to them.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
The side.
I don't have one of these in my classrooms. All right, so we do have a brief agenda, so just we're going to introduce ourselves. We will then share the vision that we crafted as an ELA, middle school ELA department between both of our buildings. We're going to discuss the collaboration and commonality that we've really been working to develop, like Mary mentioned. It's really just started this past year, like we're not even a full year into this mission. We're gonna look at some of the data, seeing how students have been performing recently in the New York State ELA tests. We're gonna talk about some things that would be helpful as we move forward. And then, of course, if there's comments and questions, we'll field them, which you already kind of talked about. All right, so I'm Charmaine Varga. I work at Boynton Middle School. I've been at 8th grade over at Boynton for 14 years now. I did start my career at Groton High School teaching 10th grade English, and I do have 2 children in the Ithaca City School District. I have a 9th grader and then a child up at DeWitt in 7th grade.
And I'm Jennifer. I have certification in elementary education, so 1 to 6. Most of my experience teaching has been at 6th grade, but I also did 4 years at Fall Creek. And I have 3 kids in the district. I have twins in 5th grade, and I had a kindergartner. So our team, our middle school ELA team, is definitely more than just the gen ed teachers. So there's actually 27 people who are collaborating to create the middle school English language arts experience. And they are across 4 different departments. So we have the gen ed teachers, and then we have reading teachers, special education teachers, and English as a new language teachers collaborating with us to support all of the students that we have in our classes. So I just wanted to kind of give that context that there's actually 27 of us that are working together.
And so to craft this work, we drafted a shared vision. So this is going to be one of the few things that we kind of look at really closely, because I think it really highlights all of our goals between the 2 buildings. So our goals regardless of if you go to Boynton or at DeWitt, we want our students to be curious, competent, and thoughtful readers, writers, speakers, listeners, and thinkers. And so we will make sure that all students are engaging with a wide variety of texts, that we are intentionally picking to make sure that students are seeing themselves in the text, but they're also seeing a reflection of the world in which they live. And we, of course, always emphasize the use of evidence to support any of their thoughts that they engage with the text with. We always want to be mindful of how we're reflecting what's going on in the world and what's happened in the world of literature to make sure that students are understanding the context in which literature has been created, right? Nothing's ever created in a vacuum. So we often take a very humanities-like approach to make sure that students understand the historical context as well as cultural context when they're reading literature. We want to make sure that students are able to express their ideas, definitely focusing on a mission of having their voice being used for a tool of communication and advocacy. And we want them to participate in academic discussions. We want them to be a part of conversations in the world that's happening around them. We want to make sure that they are asking questions with the literature and the world that they're encountering, and really work on sharing perspectives and using it as a method to really broaden their worldview. So essentially, we really want to make sure that students are always aware of equity, fairness, and power, and understanding that language is a source of that meaning, power, and connection, and the way that people interact with the world.
So if that's our philosophy, we can start to move that more toward what it looks like in practice. And as a team, we've come up with 6 shared commitments that no matter what class you're in at whatever grade level, these are things that the teachers in the room are going to be focusing on. So developing students' literacy skills, selecting texts carefully and intentionally that honestly are changing frequently. Like, we don't teach the same thing from year to year because the students that we have in front of us are different, and there are different things that are happening in the world that we want to highlight and talk about and think about. It's really important to us English teachers that we have kids reading books. Lots of pieces are being published in the Times and other places about how kids' reading skills as they get to college are just like, kids aren't able to read full-length texts, and professors are not able to assign the texts that they once were able to. So we feel really a real need to increase stamina for reading, valuing student voice and choice, providing opportunities for reflection, for kids to think about what they're learning, how they're learning it, how our classes are helping them to learn, and then just being ever mindful to connect across the content areas, particularly with science and with social studies.
I have just a couple of questions. I love the idea around connecting across science and social studies. Can you talk about how does that happen?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So at DeWitt in 6th grade, I actually collaborated with Dr. Kutsikas back there on a renewable energy unit. We did that for 2 years. We had a renewable energy symposium. So they taught the science, we taught the reading and the writing, and students created a research project. So that's one example. And I know that teachers in science, social studies, and ELA are all working with this CCERS writing, this analytical writing. And we're doing it in the same ways. So, you know, teachers in science and social studies are talking to one another. Like, how are you teaching claim? Like, what do you expect the claim to look like? Like, how are we teaching the reasoning after the evidence? So in English, I call it interpretation. Science calls it reasoning, but it's the same thing. Like, how are we getting kids to think about the evidence and to connect it back to the claim? And also, yeah, you know, in terms of, we have this later in the slides, but thinking about how we get kids to write good sentences. So I know at DeWitt, we've been really interested in the writing revolution that's going into Boynton. So those sentence level activities are being used at science, at social studies, and in English. So it's lots of ways that we are connecting.
One other follow-up question. Thank you, that's helpful. Is there, I heard you say, I feel like on the previous slide you mentioned sort of like this combination of engaging with a wide variety of texts, both this sense within the world. But then I also heard you say that the books change every year. Are there books that are, I might have just misunderstood, are there books that are just taught every year regardless?
So yeah, I mean, it's not every year that the texts change.
But I mean, like, within a grade level, is there like all 6th graders read blank?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
No. So we try to be responsive. We really want to look at our students and also receive feedback from the students from years past. I know that we often do check-ins on whether or not students found a particular novel engaging. And you can obviously, in the classroom, you can sense if kids are interested and invested in the work that we are talking about. And so we really try to be mindful of that feedback from students to make sure that they are seeing themselves and seeing the world in the literature that we're studying. So there might be a year where there's a couple books that I've taught consistently, right? But there are also times where I end up switching, like I'm finishing up a brand new unit right now that has received wonderful feedback from my students that I think really met the needs, and it was more contemporary than the text I had taught in the past for that particular addressing those standards.
Interesting.
Okay.
When different books are read in different classes, what about, I guess, the lessons and the methodologies that come after? Because I mean, I suppose whatever the text is, I mean, is, you know, can be meaningful, and that's maybe another conversation to have another time. A little more detail, but then when you're actually developing lessons, is that consistent in terms of what's these?
Yeah, trying to make sure that we are focusing in on, and we'll talk about this in a couple slides, the power standards, that we're making sure that throughout all of the grade levels, as well as through all years, like building, we are assessing these same standards. So like the text can be the tool to get to that outcome for students.
And then just one other question I have, that's something you said before. When you guys are speaking across disciplines like science, social studies, English, I was just wondering, was that structured, or is it like more anecdotal, like, hey, how are you doing this, or is it?
We've had, well, there's definitely been a push, I would say, more recently this year with that structured conversation. We are, like Jennifer already mentioned, all working on the CER or CCERS analytical writing structure, but there have also been times in the past where we've done, you know, project-based learning, where we've collaborated intentionally with a social studies teacher to have that content, much like what you just mentioned with Dr. K, to build across the different classes.
Thanks.
Yeah.
If I can jump in, I think the team time structure where
Really?
schedule,
Yes.
work day
Yes.
is what facilitates that. When we're
Yes.
talking about what needs to be in place for that to happen.
Yeah.
So
We can have those conversations.
So if you wanted to explain a little bit what that was.
What team time?
Because
Yeah.
wanna assume any know what
Yeah.
it is.
So in our schedule for middle school, we have common team time where we are able to meet with our grade level colleagues. And that was the time where we were able to plan these project-based lessons. So it's, that time is spent between, having family conferences. One of the days is dedicated to working with our other grade level colleagues. So my other, the other English teacher at 8th grade. And then we have time where if there's not the family conferences taking place, we can use that time to do some of that planning. Because it takes a lot of work to do those kind of cross-curricular units or activities.
There's been certain department time, staff meeting time, PLC time devoted to developing this kind of thinking around analytical writing. And just as an anecdote, I was grading some students' writing earlier this year and just like noticed a need to help 6th graders develop more complex claims. So I went to my team and I said, hey, this is how I'm teaching students to write a complex sentence claim. And Allison's like, oh, like, let me write that down so that I can do it. And, Ann Becker, same thing. So we are trying to be very intentional about teaching this structure in the same way across multiple disciplines.
How much of this is limited or going across like the teams within the grade levels? Like you guys are all on a team, right?
Yeah.
You're doing this work. Well, how does that relate to what the team is doing?
Same. So they have the same rubric, the same thinking around the different parts, it's later on in the slides how we're getting there, but we are taking a common approach to analytical writing across teams and across schools.
And then the strategies that you're kind of
That's right.
finding as you go.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's obviously
Shared.
both. So it's like team time, a team, or is it team?
One day a week it's double team. So it's like the whole 6th grade team comes together one day a week.
And it's the same at Boynton. And I will say by 8th grade, because I know that in 6th grade, students started working on the CER structure at Boynton last year. And I'm hearing conversations today with a 7th grade study hall, and I'm listening to them talk about the commonality of what a claim looks like in this class versus that class. Like they have a task they're doing for social studies and they're bouncing ideas off of each other and they're making references that they've heard in science class and in English class. So they're seeing how connected all of this writing is, and I think that it's really helping them. So. Okay. So Jennifer just shared about our shared commitments and kind of like the ways that we were getting to successfully help working with students to help them reach all of these goals. So we have kind of collected just some samples, some like evidence, because we definitely like to have evidence for our own thinking. Some evidence of the ways that we are working in our classes across grade levels, across buildings, to build literacy skills. So I know obviously some of this font is super, super small. It's really hard. But we wanted to show samples of the ways that students are building their literacy skills through increasing vocabulary, that they are also working for verbal expression. So we often, in many classes, students experience Socratic seminars as a way to build knowledge, as well as a way for us to assess their understanding of a text. And of course, having conversations is really important in life. We also, if you see underneath the white bird image, there's a close reading activity where students are working to build literacy skills through enhancing background knowledge for a text in 6th grade. The next section, we are looking at a sampling of different books from the different buildings and different grades, where we're really working to center student identity. We want to make sure that the literature that students are reading function both as mirrors as well as doors to be able to explore the world and also see themselves in the literature that they are studying, to make sure that their experiences are validated and they see themselves reflected in the text. Because that obviously helps increase engagement and build empathy.
So when it says selecting text centering, does that mean that all of the text selection across 6th grade, the primary consideration is identity?
That is not exclusively the goal, but I will say that we definitely want to make sure that we are honoring all of our students' different experiences, as we have a very diverse population. Yeah.
Do you guys, did you want to say it?
No, I mean, I think just like being mindful about also covering different multiple genres, right? So that students are exposed to like different ways to read as required by the text in front of them.
Yeah, that's, well, sorry,
No,
I was gonna ask about that.
No, go ahead and ask it. Oh, I'm just gonna.
Okay, I'll go. So. Yeah, I'm sort of like, I'm trying to remember like the books that I read in middle school ELA, and I wrote like, I have like a distinct memory of reading The House on Mango Street.
Okay.
Which is like
A little
like
vignettes.
like a window for me, right? It's like Sandra Cisneros, different experience, and then there's
Yeah.
one about like little.
Lord of the
We've
Flies.
all kind of with that, we did that in high school.
Wait, that's not
And then there was one, I forget what it's
I'm
called.
so old.
I actually I have students who have chosen to read that for an independent book because they've heard about it and they're always just shocked by, I know, yes.
Johnny Trinity.
Oh, Johnny.
No one,
No, Johnny.
no one's read that, I don't know, but,
We retired that
I'm like,
like
I remember seeing
many,
that in
many,
book
many,
reviews.
many years ago.
Yeah.
and then there was like a book about a Jewish kid who got bullied, and I was like, yes, that's me, that's right here.
Yeah.
And so, I guess, I don't know, like maybe it's just a wondering I have, and I'm curious for a reaction on it, it's like, I am a little struck by there not being any canonical texts. Like where it's like, I think there's something to be said about like being able to go, oh, I'm excited to go to sixth grade to read blank.
Yeah.
Or or like I know that because they read this in sixth grade, because they read whatever in sixth grade, that eighth grade Animal Farm would actually make sense.
Mhm.
So I'm just curious for a response to that.
So I know Romeo and Juliet is
Yes.
being read, I mean, canonical text. So it's not that there is a complete absence of that. It's just also a desire to sprinkle in some other things as well.
I'm sorry to clarify, when I mean like whatever we determine as canonical, so I just mean if Romeo and Juliet is read, which like, is that then? I guess I'm getting back to that question of like, is it fair to say that in eighth grade, Romeo and Juliet is always read, or The House on Mango Street is always read in sixth grade, or not?
I would say, I can say yes to Romeo and Juliet. There have been a couple years where we just had to respond to things that were happening in our school community that we chose to teach 12 nights instead of, but we always have like, we're thinking about a stat.
And I think
Yeah,
that like
text.
as English teachers, like we really like to read. Right. So like we'll read a book and we're like, oh my gosh, like I have to teach
They're
this
gonna love
book. Right. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's also part of it. It's flexible and it's fluid based upon where some of our interests are, what's happening. We read a graphic novel on like, the ethics of the horse racing industry, because the horse racing industry was getting all this traction, about the kind of drugging of the animals and the ethics around that. And there was this really great graphic novel that was written about it. So like we've taught that for a while. It's a flexible and fluid, but I think what we need to emphasize is just like the skills that we are teaching the students is the same, and we're solid there. As the texts change.
Yeah. And I think that while we are very dynamic in that, trying to respond to the world, to our students, to new things, because as you mentioned already, students really are struggling with maintaining stamina to read an entire text. So it's really important to find texts that they're going to engage in. That while we might have that kind of dynamic approach to selecting texts, we are also having conversations with our grade level colleagues so that we know the short stories that they've read or the literature that they studied in sixth and seventh grade. So I think that's so that we can make those references. Like if I'm doing an activity and there's a story that connects with Langston Hughes's Thank You, Ma'am, I can make that reference and they're like, oh yeah, we did that last year in seventh grade. So really having transparent conversations and that connection within the building, but also across the building so that we can have clearly communicate that we understand past things that they've studied. Yeah.
I was curious also just about like the number of books that students are reading per year. Not, I mean, it sounds sort of superficial. How many books have you read? But like, I mean, given that, we hear things like, I mean, there's discussion like college professors are saying 25% of the students in our class haven't even read a book before they got to college. And I'm just wondering about building stamina and just so curious about numbers that one would expect in a typical year a student might read.
Yeah. Well, I can speak to eighth grade. Students have to read, I think it's a total of 4 or 5 full length, or novels, full-length texts as like, so if we talk about like a whole class novel, right? Like everyone has that same experience of the text that we're studying, we're talking about. Then we have collections, 2 different collections of short stories. So more, we want to think like kind of canonical texts, like Alice Walker, different, classics that maybe when they go to college, their professors might expect them to have experienced some of those pieces of literature. And then they also have 3 independent choice books that they get to select, really, as long as it's grade appropriate. And we encourage them to push themselves, right? The zone of proximal development to go just a little bit farther than what something they've read in the past. And then they have to create a project or a response to those texts. So.
And then in 6 and 7, is there sort of a stepwise fashion to
Yeah.
build up to 8th grade? Because that's robust.
I think that most
Wait, did
of.
someone say 6, 7?
Oh, sorry.
I thought that in
It's
my
not a
head.
thing anymore. I know, we reset it,
That was
that's what we're saying.
2025.
I know,
No, but did that
2025.
happen or did I just hear it?
You
in my
did
head?
6th
Yeah.
and 7th grade. You
Yeah.
heard.
I now say 7th and 6th.
Yeah. So
Okay.
7th.
Sorry.
So,
I happen to have the inside track because I have a student in my house in 8th grade. So I know what's going on and I know what happened in the past years, but I was wondering, just to put it out there for in 6th and 7th grade, 7th and 6th grade, what's the vibe now in terms of?
right, so we typically at 6th grade will have an anchor or a mentor text that we're teaching every quarter with application texts that students are using to apply whatever they've learned in class to outside reading. And those are, we could call application books. And usually we have a menu of 6 to 8 different application books that students can pick from, and it's sort of self-paced. So some students will read all 8 application books and other students will get through maybe only 1, but it's kind of a mentor anchor text, common experience for everybody in the class, and then an application text where students are working more independently or in small groups of peers who have also chosen the same application text.
Thanks.
All right, so we've kind of already touched on some of these pieces in the conversation. You'll see that we have the ways that we're working to increase stamina for students. We definitely are encouraging them to self-select books because our goal is not obviously to have them be successful in middle school, high school and beyond, but also for them to actually love reading. That is a big part of what we hope for because we, as Jennifer already mentioned, we do love reading and we spend a lot of time trying to find the next best book that kids will just love. And so they do independent reading and they are able to explore a variety of pieces. We do visits to the library for book talks so that the librarians can share what their thoughts are. And then because we do want to make sure we always have a way to justify what our opinions are about a text or about a character, about conflict. We do have supports like an evidence tracker that helps them pace out their reading schedule because obviously if one person chooses a 200-page book, their pacing is going to be a little bit different than someone who's chosen a 400-page book that they have to pace. So we help support them in that way. And so that's definitely something that we are focusing on at all grade levels across the buildings. We want kids to love reading. And then
Sorry, just one quick thing.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, I just want to name for time.
Mhm.
We'll probably, our conversation will have to stop at 5:45, so we have time
Okay.
for our final item.
okay, yeah,
So I
yeah,
just want to share,
okay.
I want to share for.
I'll be brief.
I mean,
Brevity is not
If-
my forte.
it's mainly our fault. And I just want to let you know that like we're. that it's
I'm gonna
Okay.
make it a little bit harder for you too, because I wanna say that I had the privilege of going with some students to a local bookstore. And the students said, wow, this reminds me so much of our school library, which is a really beautiful thing to hear them say. And then the store owner said, oh, do you go to blah, blah, blah? Your teacher librarian helped me curate this selection. And so just a shout out to and you mentioned, the collaboration with the librarians in your schools. And I wanted to be sure to highlight their work. So,
And so if we go forward, you'll see that we have examples of student projects just to make sure that we actually get through all these pieces. We show some text that we are using to connect across content areas. So these are other texts that are being taught. And then we obviously provide lots of opportunities for students to reflect on their own work and receive feedback from their peers as well as us.
So here are the power standards. So we have 51 standards in English language arts, and they're very similar. If you look from 6 to 7 to 8, language is ever so subtly different for only a handful of those standards, which means that the standards are not changing over the course of our 3 years. So what we've done is we've created standards maps so that we can see what standards are being taught every quarter. And then from there, we were able as a team to say, okay, well, these are our power standards because they're being taught in every quarter at every grade level. So there are 7 of them. So there are 2 reading standards that are power standards, the writing arguments, that's the analytical writing we talked about earlier, speaking and listening standards, and then language standards. So we call these our power standards. That is not to say that the other ones are not being taught. They certainly are. It's just maybe they're not taught every single year, but by the end of 8th grade, all of our students will have experienced all 51 of the standards, with these power standards being really heavily assessed and tracked.
All right, and so now we're looking at some of the instructional practices that Mary mentioned, the numeracy briefs. We were referencing the literacy briefs that look at really effective practices to encourage lifelong literacy. And if you look at the bar graph on the right, I think it's important to note that it talks about how effective collaborative and culminating projects are, and performances and celebrations, text-based discussions and writing opportunities, and then engagement with a variety of high interest and diverse complex texts, which are all things that we really focus on for our commitments to making sure that students are successful and enjoying ELA classes. So those are some of the things that are most impactful for secondary students.
I agree, these are so impactful. You know, you mentioned a couple of times connection with social studies. I'm curious. This is just like me, like remembering in my high school experience, there was like the combined course or like the
Humanities.
Like social studies where you're reading about it in where you're reading about it in English, and it's then reinforcing the nonfiction textual reading. So is there something like that happening here, or is there a movement towards that?
I think depending on what the unit is that we're working on and timing of aligning with social studies curriculum, because that is a really quick like overview of 100+ years of American history when we're thinking about 8th grade standards, that we will try to have that alignment when possible. But it's not always happening. Like we'll have those conversations and say, okay, well, we were just talking about our Native American Heritage Month text, and the social studies teacher had just talked about like Indigenous experience and things that they were being active to fix. Yeah, okay.
This one we can go through pretty quickly. So another thing that we are that we're committed to doing is creating a curriculum map for every grade level in each of the buildings. We're in year 1 of this. I know we have them done, but we're kind of making sure that that's something that our colleagues are going to be doing within the year, so that we can not only share the content that we've created, but also just ensure that we have commonality in the practices and the resources that we're using. So that's an ongoing project.
And when we say it, can you help distinguish? Because I know like we looked at MAP and we saw, for example, the sort of very detailed resources that we would be able to provide with families online. To what degree would that be possible in ELA, given the approach that you're laying out?
So, I mean, we send a newsletter that's kind of similar, like, hey, this is welcome to quarter 2, like, this is what we're focusing on, this is what you should be looking for at home. That kind of structure is in place. Maybe not in all of the classrooms, but something that we're working toward.
Yeah.
It's like an at a glance, right?
Yeah.
It's like an at a glance. This is the upcoming 10 weeks.
And that's common across the
Working toward getting there.
Yeah.
And then it said just for 6th graders doing the writing skills, what's the word with 7th and 8th?
Well, it would get then moved. We're like here, right? But I know 8th grade science at DeWitt are doing the writing revolution as well. So it's just beginning to take hold, and we're just beginning to think about like actually having some real vertical alignment there. Like if sixth graders are really solid at the sentence level, then like seventh grade, we can start building that out to eighth grade, we can start really building out to the essay level. So it needs to be paced out, but we're only at the very beginning.
Okay. So trying to be mindful of time. And so this is a big push, and this is something that we started this August, is making sure that regardless of building that you're in or grade level, we have 3 different analytical writing tasks that all students are taking. That's the same regardless of if you're at DeWitt 6th grade, you're taking the same one at Boyd in 6th grade, and we do one at the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year. And they are reading a passage and they are writing one of those CCERS paragraphs that consists of the claim, context, textual evidence, reasoning analysis, and then a summary statement. And so I will say that being part of the creation of these tasks has been really, really helpful and keeping the goal in mind as we are instructing, because we're having lots of really great conversations about what the expectations are for an analytical paragraph in 6th grade versus 7th grade versus 8th grade. And obviously having those conversations at grade level to make sure that we're all having the exact same expectations, not only when we're working together to evaluate these common assessments, but also for the day-to-day writing that they're doing in our classes. So I really think that the conversations that we've been having has been really, really helpful to make sure that we are having horizontal alignment, but also eventually vertical alignment as we move into year 2, year 3, and beyond for this.
And in addition to the benchmarking around analytical writing, we have benchmarking for reading. So again, 3 times a year, students are doing an ORF, which is an oral reading fluency. That measures their decoding accuracy, their words per minute, their fluency, as well as their kind of word level comprehension. So that's happening 3 times a year. Additionally, Mary and Lynn were kind enough to get us access to the pro subscription to Common Lit. And that has a built-in assessment that is aligned with 6 of the reading standards, that we are able to take data 3 times a year for every 6th, 7th, and 8th grader. And that data we are now using to inform our MTSS decisions. So from that data, we're able to see this group of students needs extra support with R2, which is being able to develop a theme or a central idea from the text. So from that tier 1 data, we're able to create labs at the tier 2 level that are focused on just that particular skill.
Are students missing something to go to those labs, or?
No.
Study hall.
Yeah.
Can parents have access to the assessment results to get a sense of where their kids stand, and how would they get that?
Right, so that we don't send it home. That's something that I think we could think about as a group, but we don't send that data home, though it informs every conversation we have with parents. So conference time, the data is informing the conversation, even shared in that way. It's just not going home to all caregivers 3 times a year. We don't have a structure in place for that.
Well, that's, I mean, you mentioned, I guess as far as conference time goes, just my experience with that has been that there aren't that many times if you're having specific concerns or needs or questions, you can certainly make an appointment. I understand that, but there isn't really enough time for everybody to come in. So I guess I was only bringing that up to say that it isn't the case that every parent is coming in for a conference and then therefore would be informed.
No.
And parents, I don't know that these assessments are being given. So I'm just putting that out there as some way to share, not necessarily putting it home in every kid's backpack 3 times a year, but parents just knew, hey, if you're curious about how your students are doing, and
I think there's it's similar thing with math, right? It's like if the data exists, I know that we can't control what people will do with it, right? Sometimes we might send it home and a parent might go, oh my gosh, what's wrong with you, kid? Like, no, that's not the way to approach it. But I think that personally, I know I would love to see a system for communicating that both that assessments are happening and that the results exist.
I know that in our weekly newsletters that we send at the different grade levels at point and with the week at a glance, we will mention that that's there. And I believe, if I remember correctly, it came up at open houses, but I don't know about how the ease of which we could share this data. I mean, that's a really great point, because I know. I would
When
love to know
students
that.
are in a tier 2 lab, then they are progress monitor every 2 weeks, and that data goes home. But I hear it's the question of everybody.
Everybody can.
Yeah.
And then also like with sensitivity to the fact that, because I have experience with this, when you're providing feedback and sharing assessment results, I think it's very important to contextualize and explain those results, because if you just say, here's some numbers, and everybody looks at the numbers, because like, for example, if I do an IQ test or something, they say, oh, your IQ is 110 or whatever. That's just meaningless, and also can stress people out, and they don't even know what it means. So I feel like having time to even unpack the data is also important if you're gonna share it. So I know that it's a big question. It isn't just like, oh, just mail everything home.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's a good thing to maybe think about.
Yeah, I think that's great. We can definitely add that to something that we work on moving forward. Yeah. Okay. So as we're looking ahead in the last couple slides, 10 minutes. So we pulled some data numbers from the New York State Department of Education, looking at the growth that we have been experiencing just in these past couple of years. So if we look at, 2022, 23 in each of the years, looking at proficiency means that the students have scored either a 3 or a 4, and a 3 is grade level and 4 is beyond grade level. And so we're looking at the growth that has already been happening, and we are very, very early into this process. So we're not even a full year into this collaboration. So I trust that we will continue to see gains.
I might be missing it. So is this great to hear? Like, right, it's early in the process of some of these years, so it's almost like I wouldn't even call it baseline data, it just is what.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing is this a chart for gains? I'm not seeing that.
No, so this is looking at the number of students that are proficient, meaning earning a 3 or a 4. Okay, so like the percentage of all students that had been marked and scored a 3 or 4, thus were considered proficient according to state standards. So like as we look at the percentages increasing over the last couple of years, like that's really good. So if we look, for example,
how has it been? I'm very bad at charts and.
Okay.
And
Oh my God.
Just look at the green.
Yeah.
So grade 6.
If you look at
Right.
grade 8, from 63 to 60.
Yeah.
For example, grade 8. But here we went from grade 6 in 23 to 50%, and grade 6 was 56%.
And from 60%.
Yeah, so each of these lines here are like 6, 6, 6, 7, 7, 7, 8.
Yes.
What is our standard for improvement? I guess like what makes us go, like what is considered?
Even significant.
Yeah.
We have like a percentage that we're hoping for. I mean, we obviously want. The
The
goal is that I know that we're all making improvement, and that ideally in a perfect world, everyone would be scoring 3s and 4s, right? So that's obviously a goal, and you see that we are definitely making improvements. And I think that we have some numbers and data on the next slide that really show this improvement. So, we obviously don't want to stop at only 68% of 8th graders meeting proficiency. We hope for more than that. But I think it's important to see where we are ranked in comparison to other 8th graders in the state. So if you look at these bulleted points here, we had 68% last year of students in the eighth graders in the ICSD meet proficiency, where only 53 of the state met that goal as a whole. Okay, so obviously we want to keep on having improvements, and that's what we're working toward. And I really think that us having these conversations is really helpful to make sure that we're all supporting students with best practices. But we are definitely making gains. And if you look at the table that's at the bottom portion of the screen, you will see that all of our students, regardless of subgroup, have made pretty substantial change in the last year in performance. Yeah. Yeah.
I had one question. I mean, is this to say that a lot of what's happening in the classroom in terms of like with learning methodology and the types of things that you're doing are sort of in some way mirroring the expectations of the state exam at the end? Or is that a coincidence that people are doing better on that test? I guess I'm curious about.
The writing
Yeah.
on that test is analytical.
Mhm.
And you have to write from evidence. So across multiple disciplines, we're having students write from evidence in the same way, with the same kind of assessment. So they're getting a lot of exposure, and a lot of practice, and a lot of feedback across the year in multiple different places.
And for what it's, something that I wrote this down earlier and I just want to say it is. I've just seen a lot of districts that in attempting to improve state test scores, try to mimic the state tests in inappropriate ways, and it's just so nice to see. Because the test doesn't have kids read whole novels, right? But you're having them do that.
Yeah.
And just like, it's very nice to see like the number of methods that are just like involving students, getting them to do work that is more meaningful and frankly more challenging than what they're expected to do on the state test. And then the results go from there. So it's nice to see an awareness that not a misguided alignment that can really screw up teaching and learning.
Well, and then
Which I know
you're
you're
not.
not saying. I just-
No,
Yeah.
I agree, and then you're not teaching to the, I mean, you know, the whole idea of teaching to the
Yeah.
test, which is, feels not palatable to most groups. And then, you know, but the fact that the methodology is leading to improved outcome on the test that, and there should be some overlap in state standards, I'm guessing, between the test and what's happening in the classroom, so I think meeting the state standards is really an important thing. And so I think that's good.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
Like it's very exciting to see.
Yeah.
To see that change, and it's an increase with
Yeah.
every subgroup, and yeah, seeing the percentiles in the previous slides, kind of like, oh, but then you look at the state and you're like, oh, it's just more like the reality of, you know, it's just hard to
We
like,
need to get kids reading and writing.
yeah, it's,
All the time.
yeah,
Right,
right,
just
you guys,
consistently.
I think that's
So,
really exciting.
And I
to
will
see.
just real quick, we didn't plan this, but like this chart, Lynn shared with us at the beginning of the year, and we've been able to access performance data like from the samples. So we do a gap analysis to see how students were performing on particular standards on the test, to see if there's a spot where like we missed that,
yeah.
like we didn't talk enough about tone, right? So like, so it's really helpful to look at that data. So continuing having access to that is really, really helpful.
It'll be interesting to see if those, if the standards that you pulled out that are aligned, that you're like emphasizing in every quarter.
Very much so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are
Yeah.
the standards that are
Yes.
assessed on our tests.
Very
That's the biggest, right?
Yeah. So in terms of, in the last 3 minutes, in terms of what we need, we have sort of 5 things that we need and would love. So this
Like,
kind
this is the
of,
first time I've seen a slide like this, it's so exciting.
Does the red, orange, green, is that just to
I
distinguish?
just, I like
It
color
matches
order,
with the
which,
palette, yeah.
That's the most important.
Well, that's what I was trying to figure out.
No, it's just color order.
Yeah.
But we need like time, right? 27 of us, right, are working together on this, and it's not just horizontal alignment. So it's not just like we're gonna get the 6th grade team together. It's like we need to be talking vertically as well. So time over the summer that's paid, really intentionally planned. Not all of our sections have co-teachers. There are a few that don't. So just continuing to support stable and consistent co-teaching relationships is a priority. There's a math strategist. So, you know, Charm and I were saying, well, why isn't there an ELA strategist? Someone different than the department leader that is sort of taking a bird's eye view at this. And that is sort of just like thinking about the transition point from 5th to 6th grade, but also then thinking about the transition point from 8th to 9th grade, is sort of maybe a hope. And then in terms of just consistent ongoing professional development, it's happening a lot in math, I think because of Pat, maybe in part because of Pat, and just thinking about what consistent ongoing professional development do we need. We have a lot of access to stuff at BOCES, but you know, just the writing revolution is really excellent. Things coming out of the Reading League are really excellent. So just having access to professional affiliations, National Council of Teachers of English, being able to go to their convention, being able to go with colleagues from the other building helps to build collegiality. It helps to build trust. So, you know, if we're thinking about wanting to have some like similar units across the school, then like we have to have, you know, relationships, trust, compromise, and collegiality and being able to go to some of these meetings with our peers, different grade levels, different departments, different schools, I think would really foster that.
I wish you all had started with these two slides because I have a million questions and I know that we need to. Just to say, I really appreciated it. I truly mean, like, we've had many presentations. I don't feel like there's ever been a clear, like, and this is what we need, which is wonderful. So I have a million questions for follow-up, which I won't do now, but the one question I would like to ask is, across all of these, if there was like one thing that you're like, this is what's inhibiting us from being able to do this. And if it's time, if you can like expand, like, I know that there are professional development opportunities that are available that I wish I heard about more teachers taking advantage of. I know that there's, that Catherine and Mary have been talking about shifts in routine time and how to kind of create more time during the school day to meet. So like there's things that are either in discussion or that could happen if people take advantage. What are the things that's like for people who clearly want to take advantage? I mean, what?
So
I know there's many.
so not professional development, like thinking out of our
And-
5 asks,
well, yeah, and
So
even
what's
like
number
the
one?
theme across the asks, like
I
what
would,
is it?
I don't
about
want to
the
speak for you.
goals that
You
we
speak
know
first and then I'll
about?
speak.
Okay.
A big question.
So I would go with the first. I will say that just creating the common assessments and working together to create a common rubric and tease out what each of the levels, like a 4, 3, 2, 1, what does it look like for standard 1 W1A, right? And so having those conversations, that was one task with one rubric and it took an entire day.
Yeah.
One. So like, if we want to continue to spread that kind of writing and that kind of commonality of approach, I think for me, at least the time would be the most valuable. And I know like the other 8th grade English teacher at Boynton, we work and we plan together and we're virtually planning just like we were on documents. Like it's so much extra time to make sure that we are all in line, right? So that's,
And you go. Go, Jacob.
I was gonna say, out of respect for our last
Yeah,
agenda,
yeah.
we do need to close out, but I do wanna say,
We have to be heard.
I would also like to ask one question.
go for it.
Well, no, please finish your thought. I was just saying, before we switch, I'd like to ask.
Yeah, I was just gonna say a couple of follow-up items I'm thinking about is first, I think I just wanna echo what everyone's been saying. It's obvious you've been doing so much hard work on this. And that the impact is both, in a table and also probably felt, right, by students, which I think matters a lot. I think as a follow-up to this, we asked it in the math conversation and you have brought it to our attention with the EOA. I do think it would be worth this committee's time to spend a meeting at some point with the budget cycle to talk about what are the high impact budget things that as a committee you might want to advocate for to the whole board, because there's obviously really good work happening with teaching and learning, and most good things require money. So I think it would be a worthwhile conversation, and I think you're helping make us think of that.
So,
Can we just,
oh, yeah.
No, it's an exciting question to answer. I would love for you to just have the opportunity.
I mean, I would agree with Charm that having time to be intentional about doing this work is a priority. However, I also feel like having the relationships with our colleagues across the building makes it possible to do the work, that we trust our colleagues, that we're willing to compromise, we're willing to come together and work. And I feel like those relationships are often, or could be very successfully built from having exposure to professional development opportunities to attend together. I was able to go to the Reading League conference this fall and was able to make friends with some people from Boynton who I didn't know, that we started sharing ideas. We've gotten together since. It's just, there's a feeling of we're all in it together. We're not two separate buildings. So while I think that having the paid time is the priority, I also feel like it rests upon having like authentic relationships with our peers.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I always want to hear from Dr. Coach Fisher. One of my favorite. So I'll point out that I think that this, I want to continue with some of this because I think a natural place to continue this discussion is in our next agenda item, which is listening circles. So, I don't think this should stop today, and I'll say that. But I think the one question I have, and with Lynn being in the room too, because I was just looking at my schedule, because tomorrow we have a project innovation meeting, and I'm just thinking about what your asks are, which I also greatly appreciate. But also, when we look at the district as a whole and we look at some of the other work that we're doing, where we can incorporate what you're doing with what we're doing, give me to try to make sure this makes sense. Some of the work we're doing with project innovation overlaps with trying to get some of the needs in ELA met. And I just wonder how we can cross collaborate just with like what you're saying, not just with building leaders, not just across our middle schools, but when we're talking about the students we're serving in the summer and passing the baton and all of these other conversations we're having, it's so interconnected. So if we can find a way to just really bring this work together, I think it can enhance what you're doing. And I can't stress enough that this is why I think we need to start our listening circles and continue them like big time, because we can address so much of this now.
And that is, I know that it is a good segue because part of the ELA walks is that, right? It's meeting with teachers about like literacy. So I know we have our first one sketched for. You were in the process of sketching it, Mary? I forget.
Yeah, the date we have that I think could work is so in the past, we've done the listening circles on a Wednesday so that staff can attend them. So it'd be the second or the fifth Wednesday. So that would be February 11th. We also could do, February 10th for instructional rounds, and then having the list. They don't have to be connected, but it might be easier for folks if they are more. I should say more convenient for folks if they are. So those are the two dates. And working with Dan on
I just want to say thank you again. Can we all give them a round of applause? You have such a busy day and to do this evening as well. I just genuinely cannot thank you enough. So if we know we have our, oh God, if we, specifically, if we know we have our next one on the schedule, yeah, Erin, what else? Like regarding listening circles, what else do you want to share?
I mean, here's the thing. We're talking about it. There's 3 of us that participated in them last year, and they were extraordinarily valuable. And I know we discussed at the beginning of the year, continuing that. And here we are, and I feel like we haven't moved forward with that. And we're gonna blink, and it's gonna be time to like wrap up the school year, right? Like midterms, regions just happened. And so I'm wondering if when we're gonna reinstate them. I'd love input on if that's something that, educators that participated last year are interested in continuing. I found them to be so valuable because like what we just heard from the ELA team here today can be something that we can hear more about from the rest of the teams about how they put into practice. And then that what we learn there can inform when we have an elementary listening circle. And what we were doing is having very dedicated listening circles with very sort of targeted conversation.
I can speak to that a little bit.
Yes.
So the impetus for listening circles last year were teacher-led, through the union. And the union has been very busy.
Yes.
Since then, until hopefully tonight, they will become significantly less busy and able to focus on the smaller scale projects. We've been kind of like full, really wide lens. And in that time, in the past, 2 years that we've been negotiating a collective bargaining agreement, numerous other topics have come up. People saying we'd really like pre-K would really love a listening circle to talk about how the pre-K day is structured. And we've been like, that sounds great once we ratify our contract. All these topics that have come up that because we've been in also
when actively negotiating a contract, the way that we interact as workers and the board has a different tone because of the legal parameters around negotiating a collective bargaining agreement. So we are eager to get back to that and have not been, and it's not that we necessarily lost steam, it's that we had another huge project on our plate that really dictated the way that we can track. That makes sense, 100%. Okay.
So when you think, I'm curious, Catherine, because so we know we have upcoming conversations with the ELA folks. So I raised this question about like, to what degree should we be thinking about budget? I'm curious, do you think that would be, as my mind goes to, I think it would be a good use of time to like coordinate a listening, I mean, having not been in one of them, right? So you all have experienced that like a listening circle around sort of like. Because I think this is one of the few things that falls very much within the purview of the board. It's like, how are we spending money and how can we spend money in a way that doesn't?
Yeah. I think that
I'd be curious about that from principals and teachers. And
yeah, I think for us, from teachers, typically kind of the way that we move items, like, is this an item of enough interest to move it to, it's like, are people in buildings talking to their building reps about that? And then are the building reps bringing it to rep council, and amongst the rep council, we're always evaluating, like, is this a widely, deeply felt issue that we see a solution to? And then kind of strategizing towards how do we reach that solution to this widely, deeply felt issue. So I think that through our rep structure, and we meet monthly, those topics percolate. I mean, I'm, without being prepared in any way, I have a couple that I'm like, oh, these have been on the minds of our reps. We've been talking a lot about these and talking about some next steps. So knowing that listening circles can come back into the strategies in the toolbox of how we can engage in those conversations, I think moving forward will be helpful.
And if I mean, I'm confused why you're saying budget, because the budget, that wasn't really what the listening circles were a part of. I mean, it might inform like some of it,
I
but
can see how it could inform some of it.
It can inform some of it, but I mean, we weren't specifically talking about budget. We were more talking about, like, to me, what it informed me on is what is something that we need to look at changing policy about, and what is something we as a board need to just hear. And then, Mary it's not like we needed to take it to Mary. Mary was in those sessions. It was more like, is this a policy thing to change, or is this to change?
I think if you think about the three goals of the board,
Right.
To, supervise the superintendent, knowing whether or not the superintendent's vision is, is trickling all the way down to the people delivering instruction to our kids. That is something that might come out of a listening circle. Policy revisions might come out of a listening circle, but also, like we just heard, Dr. Vischer and Ms. Varga say that one of the things that would really be helpful to them is an ELA strategist, which is certainly a budgetary decision. So I think that it all fits, it's all part of it. And I think that you don't have to worry too much about, like, could the listening circle inform budget? Yes, but it could also inform many other.
Yeah, I think budget is not necessarily a topic of the listening circle. It just informs the process.
Agree.
And
Right.
it's also the timing of it, knowing that we're always budgeting.
Yeah.
All year, multiple years out. When we use the term budget, the budget's a reflection of our values. And some things that come up in the listening circles weren't necessarily budgetary items, but structural items.
Yeah.
How are we engineering the school-wide schedule to support co-planning or not? How are we following through on our agreements around training and access to training? Okay, it looks like we need to add some asynchronous training, for example, which is the PINE modules. So I think there are some things for us to spend time on what we learned in those listening circles last year, what we did, that maybe we could work on a summary of that.
Yeah.
It would help us stay, have clarity on what the problems we're trying to solve, where we're trying to get to, when we have them again.
Sounds like we have broad agreement that listening circles are a good strategy, that we are hopefully in a place to resume. We have one starting, and then sounds like Catherine, Mary, you have almost a running list of potential topics to bring to us. I know it's 5:59, so we need to stop our meeting. We're meeting. Thank you so much. I'll send you an email with follow-up for again. Thank you.